everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and welcome back to the show. My friend Hobie Artigue, once here in the Minneapolis Twin Cities market, and
I guess
now
celebration.
I guess
Look
so.
at this. Wow.
Your phone firing up the balloons here. It was so excited about your introduction. Now, local 4 WDIV in Detroit. For the last couple years, where you've been watching the ascension of Dan Campbell's Detroit Lions. Hobie, set the scene for me, buddy. That's what TV people do, right? You
That's
go
what we
out there
do.
with your mic and you're like, I'm out here, and people are very excited. So how excited are people in Detroit for this game?
The buildup and the anticipation has been building pretty much all season long. Whenever they had that franchise record winning streak that they had, it got snapped against Buffalo. But I don't think that anything has really deterred the hopes of the fans of this franchise, because anything that pops up, I remember we were talking earlier in the season, and Aiden Hutchinson had just gotten hurt. That happened. Other injuries pop up. They lose to the Bills, but right whenever people started to waver, I think they respond. The Lions do, and just calm everybody down and show that they still can contend in the NFC and try to make it to the Super Bowl. The excitement is high. And it has to be for a game like this, because this franchise has never had a number one seed in the playoffs. And if they can get one more win, they can accomplish that feat. And I think that everybody can just feel the excitement, and it really has not calmed down at all at any point of this season. There were concerns, there were some worries, but still hope is very high for this team as they now head into the playoffs.
You know, before the Vikings and Lions played at US Bank Stadium, you and I had a conversation about what it's like to have this high of expectations for the Lions, and how were they going to handle it, and how is Dan Campbell going to deal with it. And Ben Johnson could have had a head coaching job and would have been coaching Jaden Daniels right now, but instead decided he thought that they could win a Super
That
Bowl.
would be fun, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. That would have been throwing to offensive tackles and running trick plays in the middle of the field and so forth. But, his decision has ended up paying off to put the Lions in this spot, not only in this spot, but the number one offense in the entire NFL, and to lose as many players as they have on defense and keep winning. And they barely lose that game to an incredible Buffalo team. What does that say about Dan Campbell, his leadership, Ben Johnson, that offense, that they've been able to overcome those things to continue winning and be here?
It shows you that Dan Campbell believes in his players, and the players believe in Dan Campbell. And I mean, that's kind of how it has been since day one, since he got here. And nothing has really swayed this team one way or the other. They lost to the Bills, and everybody in the facility was saying the sky's not falling. We just lost our first game in about 3 months. I mean, let's pump the brakes on that. But I think that this offense right now, you brought up Ben Johnson and the way that they are moving the football this season. I think that with all of the injuries that they had on defense, I was telling people, they can find guys to step in, step up. I mean, you don't replace guys like Aiden Hutchinson, like Carlton Davis. You find pieces that can step in there. But on offense, relatively, they've kept everybody intact except for David Montgomery. And I think at the beginning of the season, you saw the offense take some steps, and we were like, in the first 2 games, well, is this the same offense? Are they all going to be on the same page? Can they be as good? And as the season's gone on, you've just seen so many wrinkles. You mentioned the tackle passes that we've seen. We saw a hook and ladder for like the 12th time this year, it feels like, against the 49ers in that Monday Night Football game. They find ways to get the ball to their playmakers, not to mention that Jahmyr Gibbs is looking like an every down back right now for this team when they need him to be. And that's not even including the way that Jamison Williams is playing and the way he's taking the tops off of defenses, and Sam Laporta getting more involved. I think that right now they are firing on all cylinders. And at this point, the only thing that can get in their way is themselves. That's at least how it feels with this offense, because even in that Buffalo game that they played, they were going score for score for score for score with him until they turned it over, and that also had played a key role in that loss to Buffalo. That said, I think that this is going to be the best defense that they have played, maybe since the last time they played the Vikings. However, I think that this is going to be the toughest offense that the Vikings defense has seen since the last time they met. So, I mean, again, we were talking about the battle between Ben Johnson and Brian Flores the last time around. I think the sequel could be and probably will be even better than the original that we saw this year.
I mean, this is a heavyweight matchup between one of the top defenses in the league and one of the best offenses we've seen statistically in quite some time. I mean, they're over 500 points through 16 games, which
Yeah.
is a really hard bar to reach. And to overcome the injuries the way that they have, it has taken their star players stepping up, guys who maybe there were questions about, like Jahmyr Gibbs, can he be the every down
Hmm.
back, or Jamison Williams? And I'm really curious about him and his emergence and what's that's added, because last year and even going into the middle of the season matchup, I felt like Jamison Williams had been occasionally really exciting and then
Hmm.
suspended or something else or banged up or just ineffective. And
Hmm.
now every single time that I watch a Detroit Lions game, I see him in that 4-2 or whatever the heck it is that he runs making
4-1, he
plays.
said. 4-1.
I don't know about that.
Jury's
4-1
still
is
out on that one. That's pretty
okay.
fast, but
At very least, though, one of the fastest players to come out in the NFL
sure.
in years. I feel like that's the reason they've been able to take it up a notch, because last year it did seem a little bit one dimensional at times. And in the biggest moment, they tried to go to Josh Reynolds and he
Yeah.
dropped the football in the playoffs. But
Hmm.
Williams seems like he has become the perfect Ben Johnson weapon.
And don't forget about Tim Patrick too, because he has really been Josh Reynolds 2.0 this season for this team with the way he's come in and made some crucial catches in big moments. But you bring up Jamison Williams because a lot of people thought that he was just the deep ball, deep threat type of receiver. And now we're seeing Ben Johnson draw up quick end arounds for him. We saw the hook and ladder on Monday Night Football that he takes to the house. And also a very underrated part of his game is the way that he goes across the middle and is not afraid to take a hit. He has done it so many times this season. And I think that he wanted to prove to people this year because, as you mentioned earlier, he had not played a ton of football for this team, especially in his rookie year as he recovered from that ACL injury. But I think there were concerns about his inconsistencies. I don't think that those are there anymore because Jared Goff continues to go to him. Of course, Amon-Ra St. Brown is his go-to guy, but the way Jamison Williams is playing the game right now, I think that he is showing that he's more than just a deep threat, and that also gives secondaries something to worry about because he's not just the guy that everybody thought he was coming into this year. Does he have that ability? Yes. But I think that he's showing that he is maybe more of a complete receiver than maybe even people here in Detroit thought because of the way that he's playing the game right now and the plays that he's making at some crucial points of the season.
There was an article that PFF did a couple of years ago that pointed to offenses' second and third receiving options as really being the best indicator of what they could be. And this is
Hmm.
probably why the Vikings drafted Jordan Addison and traded a draft
Yeah.
pick for TJ Hawkinson, is that if you only have the Amon-Ra St. Brown, there can be a lot of focus
Hmm.
on that player. But now all of a sudden, when you have a more dynamic Jamison Williams and Tim Patrick, who has some of the best hands, I think, in the NFL, he
Hmm.
catches everything anywhere near him, and also a really good story as well. I think that
Yeah.
this has made it so dynamic and so flexible for Jared Goff that there's always options and always ways he can go.
And they've surrounded him with the best talent possible, it seems, because Jared Goff, right now, you can argue that he is playing the best football of his career with the way he's playing. There was a game against the Texans. I'm sure you remember it earlier in the season on Sunday Night Football. He had 5 interceptions in that game in Houston. Since that point, he's got 20 touchdown passes to one pick. I mean, that is pretty impressive stuff because they have surrounded him and put him in the right situations, and they have to keep him protected. I mean, that is the end of the day, the bottom line with Jared Goff at times. That said, he has really maneuvered the pocket extremely well. I remember our earlier conversation this year, how we talked about how in years past Jared Goff was a very statuesque quarterback, and if you got pressure on him, that was it. That's not the Jared Goff that we have seen this year. We've seen him use his legs on plays to get out of trouble, but just to navigate the pocket a little bit better. If he feels it collapsing, he's able to move to the left or move to the right and buy just enough time to get the ball down the field. And I think we've actually seen that a little bit more in the last few games as they've played some pretty good defenses facing Buffalo, facing the Packers. Um, yeah, I think that everything with the offense, especially right now, where you lose the physical aspect of David Montgomery running the ball, I think the more they've put on Jared Goff, and he has been the same guy all season long. He has been on the field the same guy, but emotionally just that solid, consistent leader that this team has needed.
I want to talk about Goff and Sam Darnold because they have something in common,
Mm-hmm.
which is that a bunch of people on the outside gave up on them at different
Yeah.
times in their career. Now, Darnold didn't have the high end of what happened with Jared Goff at the beginning of his career, but when Goff was traded to Detroit, there was an assumption that he wasn't going to be there long and that they
Mm-hmm.
were going to draft
Bridge
another
quarterback.
quarterback.
Yeah.
Right,
I
exactly.
mean, we're having the same conversation in Detroit as in Minnesota. Who knows what's going to happen there?
Right, exactly. That there's talking about, well, you draft somebody else at the top of the draft, develop them for a year, and then turn things over to them because people are truly obsessed with the rookie quarterback contract thing, which
Mm-hmm.
is fine when you're talking about it through a lens of a lesser quarterback. We don't need to get into who I'm referring to there, but I think what Jared Goff has really proven is that sometimes the details can get ignored in the big discussion. And the
Mm-hmm.
details with Jared Goff are that despite that 5 interception game, he really doesn't turn the ball over. And he
Mm-hmm.
really doesn't take a whole lot of sacks for somebody that is not a scrambler. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the most valuable thing you could do in the NFL, and this is what Sam Darnold has learned this year, is just throw the ball where you're supposed to throw it. And he is so good at that. And I know, like, the
Mm-hmm.
best of the best, the Josh Allen, he's going to scramble, he's going to make all those crazy plays, and that's hard to beat. But I think that where Darnold has ascended and where Jared Goff has always been good and just needed this around him is just executing the plays as they're dialed up, which is so hard to do, play in and play out. But I
Mm-hmm.
watch him and I think, when does he ever make bad decisions? He really doesn't.
And also, I think it goes back to the best coaches find a way to get the best out of their players. If you put think about anybody in any walk of life, you put them in the right situation and they can thrive. But it takes the right kind of coach to be able to do that. And he and Ben Johnson together have done some great things because Ben knows what he has. Ben knows what he has in Jared Goff. He knows what he has in the playmakers around him. And I think you brought up Dan Campbell at the beginning. It all goes back to him in building that trust and that chemistry between players. I think that just goes a long way because the more you play together with somebody and the more you come in at the ground level with people, because Amon-Ra St. Brown, Panay Sewell, they were all here in Detroit in 2021 at the beginning of the Dan Campbell era. They've joked in the past that they were all the misfits, and here they are coming together to build something special. And I think that's another thing that they all can identify with is that they all have something to prove. They all came together at a point in time where they all had something to prove, and now you're seeing the product.
And we're seeing that on this side too, because you have a team
Yeah,
that was picked to win 6, 7 games, and
yeah.
most analysts had them
A
below
bridge season until
Chicago.
they got to JJ McCarthy, and then see what Brian Flores can do with this defense. And I will also add to this too. I think that people on the outside of both fan bases identify with these teams a little bit more because they see the hard work in Detroit. They see that grit mentality. They see that, and people are attracted to that. And then they also see the Vikings on the defense where they come up with a big play, one of their NFL leading interceptions, and they have something to go with it. And people identify with that fun aspect. I mean, you put toughness and fun together, and I think that that's what you have with these two franchises. And I think that whoever comes out as the number one seed of this, um, even whoever is the 5 seed going into the playoffs, I think that the country will be a fan of both of these as we head into the playoffs.
And we're starting to see that even with Cameron Bynum and the celebrations and things like that, where
We didn't plan
there's
anything out. Do we need to?
us for a dance. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm a little too old to have watched all the Disney shows that
Yeah, you see all that gray hair in there? Yeah, I am
yeah,
too.
exactly. So I think we're a little beyond where some of these players
We're
grew up.
beyond the target audience. Yeah.
Although some of the even younger ones, they were 2 years old when Cam Bynum was watching whatever shows that he's emulating. So all I know is that they're having a great time doing it. And I think there's
Yeah.
something that's similar between Dan Campbell and Kevin O'Connell with their approach to the quarterback is that they didn't pretend it didn't happen. Like, Jared Goff got traded to Detroit in favor of somebody else.
Hmm.
And Sam Darnold is here on a $10 million contract because nobody thought he was good in the NFL. And if you try to pretend like, yeah, I mean, we believed in you the whole time, I guess, or whatever, like, I just think that these players are too smart, too mature, that they wouldn't buy that necessarily. Where Kevin O'Connell has leaned into you went through a lot, and now
Mhm.
we've found you the best situation. And the players have too, and they're raising them up on their shoulders and stuff. And I think part
That
of
scene in
that,
the locker room was just incredible
it
after
really
that game.
was. And
Yeah.
what do they say when we go up and ask them about that? Like, that guy's been through a lot. And I think that
Mhm.
there's just a galvanizing factor with the way that the coaches have handled those narratives.
And there was a situation similar here in Detroit last year in the locker room after the game. Dan Campbell's giving out game balls, and I think it was after it might have been after they beat the Rams because it all kind of blends together after a while. But he said, "You know what? You're good enough for Detroit, Jared Goff," and threw him the game ball. And that moment is one that sticks out to me from last season. And I think that's another one that just kind of feeds into you were the underdog. Now you're the top dog for this team. So here are the keys, lead us to where we need to go.
Okay, let's talk about Sam Darnold against this banged up defense. They've still
Yeah.
got some dudes. I got the snap counts from the last game here. And you'll recognize a lot of these names for Vikings fans. Kirby Joseph, because he took
Yeah.
out TJ Hawkinson's knees. Zadarius Smith was a huge acquisition for the Detroit Lions. Melifonwu had that interception of Nick Mullins last year. Terry Arnold was a top draft pick that everybody
Mhm.
wanted the Vikings to take before Dallas Turner started making plays. Jack Campbell's a top pick. All these guys, DJ Reader, Brian Branch, like, it's not like they have nobody,
No.
but they have really stopped nobody in the last
You
couple of weeks. So why is
uh,
that?
that is a good question, and I don't know if anybody has the answer because they were playing a stretch there before the Buffalo game where they were making the stops where they needed to. They were doing just enough to be good enough to keep winning games. And I think a big absence, of course, is Aiden Hutchinson because he can dominate the line of scrimmage anytime the ball is snapped. But I think right now we're seeing the loss of Carlton Davis add up because that was a guy that they brought in via trade with the Bucks. He won a Super Bowl with Tampa Bay, and then he broke his jaw in that game against Buffalo, and he's going to be out for some time. Um, and I think that Terry and Arnold is still learning the game, and because this is a passing league, I mean, he's still learning. He gave up a big play on Monday night. He's had quite a few pass interference calls. He had a lot earlier in the season. Has picked up a couple of them lately, and I think he's still learning how to play the game. The question is going into this game for me is can they make a stop when they need to at least slow a team down because that's what we saw against the 49ers. If the first half defense shows up on Sunday night, we are going to be in for a long night. But if the second half defense of that game against the 49ers shows up, then we're probably talking about a different story because I do have some concerns because I watched the game that the Vikings just played against the Packers, and it is Justin Jefferson, of course. It is TJ Hawkinson, but the way Jalen Naylor was able to get open for some plays, um, I think every game that passes, people wonder has have the injuries been too much? Have they reached that point? Have they reached that point? And then there's always a play that makes people change their minds. And we saw that with Kirby Joseph and those picks. And I think that's what Sunday's game is going to come down to. Can that defense make the stop when they need to? And can the offense protect the ball and prevent the big mistake from happening? Because it happened the last time that they played, and whenever the David Montgomery fumbled the ball. Um, and I think that that was a game-changing play that they were able to correct, but this game is gonna come down to the details on both sides of the ball for this team.
I'm really curious about, and this is like a little deep in the weeds here, but
Mhm,
time of possession, I feel like, is something we don't talk about a lot in the NFL.
mhm,
Occasionally, the Vikings dominated it against the Packers, and we give them credit for that after the game. But in this one, it almost reminds me of when Peyton Manning was cooking at his best, and every single team's strategy was, how can we keep him over there? I think
mhm.
it's the same way here with Detroit because they're not really stoppable. Causing turnovers isn't really something that they're allowing either. They've done an
Mm-mm.
incredible job of not turning the ball over. It
Yeah.
feels like the thing that the Vikings have to do is to their run game has to work, but also to work the short passing game and to have these long extended drives and then hope that they stop the fourth downs. And I did want to say that
Mhm.
at
They're
some
gonna go
point,
for him.
they are going to go for him, and they
Yep,
should go for him. And Dan Campbell is right. And look at the results. My gosh.
yep.
And I feel like there's going to be some point where one doesn't work and everyone says, see, that Dan Campbell's too reckless.
All people,
I mean,
people were waiting in that Packers game when he went for that 4th down to set up that field goal.
It's remarkable to miss the forest through the trees of how many points they've added because they are converting 4th down after 4th down. The Vikings, I don't know if you know this, feel free to use it on a newscast. The number 1 defense on 4th down for the Vikings.
Okay.
And how many times would you or I ever in our life have previewed a football game and said, this one might come down to 4th downs? And whether they actually get them. But I think that could be true because I don't expect either team to really turn the ball over a lot.
I don't think so either. And I mean, maybe we're talking 1 each, if that. And I mean, we saw in the last game that the Lions had a serious turnover and they still were able to correct things and get the win the first time around. But 4th down, Dan Campbell's going to go for it. I mean, we saw it in that game against the Packers when they had a chance to take the lead, but he wanted to milk the clock a little bit more, and it paid off. That being said, without David Montgomery, I think that does change the mindset a little bit. Also, add in the fact that Jake Bates is booting in 50-plus yard field goals time and time again. I think that might change the thought process a little bit and the implications of this game. I mean, do you have to take the points when they're there?
I
Like
personally,
that's a question. That's a question I have in this one. Whenever you are literally playing for everything.
if I'm Dan Campbell, I do the same thing that got me there. And I know that it blew up in his face last year. I know that it blew up in his face last year, but it blew up in his face because a football hit a guy in the face mask and ended up as a
True.
touchdown. Like I just,
And I mean, he said that he can sleep well at night knowing that he gave his team the best chance to win the game. I think he's comfortable with doing it.
and I think that if you had an average team and you tried to go for it on 4th down like this, it would be silly and you would just give away points constantly. This is not an average team. It's the best
No.
offense in the whole league. And I've always kind of wondered, what if a team plays like I would on Madden, right? And the result is they keep scoring 40 points every single week. And then people are like, but I don't know. Is he really doing it right? And it just, I don't know. Maybe it's, I've thought of it as when Steph Curry first started taking threes from the logo. I'm sure that NBA people, Shaq or somebody, was saying, you can't shoot it from out there. You can't be shooting it from out there. You got to dump it into the posts. Like, I just think this is sports and it's the progression of it. And when you're that good, nobody, I just think on the Viking side, you want them to punt. You want them to kick field goals. You don't want them going because you know they can convert them and turn them into touchdowns.
Especially if we get into a tight game and they start playing it like a 4-down possession every single time. Because if we get into crunch time and we get to some 4th and 2s, not like 4th and 5, I that's a different story. But 4th and 4s, 4th and 3s, that's a different story.
Where I'm really curious is if Dan Campbell at some point, because I did a story a few years ago about the massive increase in 4th downs that people were going for. And one of the things that the analytics company that I interviewed that works with some teams and worked with Philadelphia in 2017, one of the things they said is you'd be surprised at going for it in your own area is not as bad as you think it is, which sounds crazy, but oftentimes teams, you can hold them to a field goal. And if you get them, you sustain drives and keep going. And I just wonder if there's a spot in here where it's at the 30-yard line and we're going, he's going for it, and this is going to determine the game. I'm excited for that, and I fully back Dan Campbell in this endeavor.
It just happened a couple weeks ago against Buffalo with that onside kick here, where he went for the onside kick, and that kind of blew up because, like you said, like if you go for it, like the ball's going to be right there, you can hold him to a field goal. Well, he blew up on that onside kick because the Bills returned it to the 5-yard line, and it's like, how often is that going to happen in a game? And I think that got people a little on edge. But in a game like this, when you know and you believe in your players, I mean, coach knows best, and I think the team trusts him enough, and he trusts in his players enough to try to at least get it done in a game like this one.
Coach also
Because
knows
they're also going to the playoffs. They've played extremely well on the road this year. They're 8-0. I mean, home field advantage is great, but I think the bye week for this team might be even more important than home field advantage, just to get that extra time off.
I was thinking the same thing on the Vikings side, is that they've had a season where they had to go over to London and they were short on home games. And it's been a real battle to the end of the season, out to Seattle, back for a national TV game against Green Bay, and then now going to Detroit. The Honolulu flu is probably somewhat real because that team is so physical that do you really want to go to Detroit, then fly out to LA and try to run through the playoffs? Like, I just don't know that the Vikings could do that. So I've been asking everyone on the Vikings side what their percentage difference is for chances to reach the Super Bowl between a win in this game and a loss in this game. How do you view that from the Detroit side? What are the Lions' odds to make the Super Bowl in your mind if they win or if they lose?
That is a good question. With the way it's shaking out, I mean, if they were to lose this game, it is going to be last season's playoffs all over again, but just the inverse. If they do end up going to LA, or if it happens to be Tampa Bay, that would be the 4 seed. That is one of their only losses this year. Going to Philly would be of concern. I think so. Just because the way that offense is operating right now and playing outdoors in the elements, even though the Lions this year have won games outdoors because they went to Lambeau Field, they went to Soldier Field, they went to San Francisco, they won all of those games. The percentage change.
You're really dragging this out.
I know I am 15 to 20%.
You think 50? So what do you have their chances at making the Super Bowl?
And making the Super Bowl right now?
If they win.
If they were to get the number 1 seed, 35.
Okay, that's
to make the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
To make the Super Bowl.
Why I like this question is the range of answers.
It's the playoffs. Who knows what's going to happen?
The range of answers that I've gotten are everywhere from 35 to 55 to 80%. If the Vikings win it, that they'll reach the Super Bowl, but that's way high. I think you might be a little on the low side because the advantage is just so massive, and the advantage health-wise to get back to 100% is so massive.
But I don't think the one bye week is going to absolve all their injury issues.
Yep.
That's my one thing. Like getting Alex Anzalone back, that would help, but I don't think 1 week is going to help you get back Carlton Davis, to get back Aiden Hutchinson, those maybe David Montgomery. I just don't know if 1 week off is enough time to get all those players back. However, as a chance to reset, because like you had mentioned with the Vikings, this team has played on Thursday night. They've played on Thursday night. They've had the mini bye week. They've had other games they've played on Monday night. They have a short week this week coming into this game. Time off is always helpful. But
do you have any questions for me for your preparation purposes for this game? What do you want to know?
How does the Vikings defense stop this offense that we were talking about earlier has been unstoppable? I mean, the Vikings lead the league in interceptions. How do they force Jared Goff into some bad spots?
I think the biggest thing, I'm going to just go old school here a little bit, is that the Vikings have 2 healthy linebackers, Blake Cashman and Ivan Pace Jr. And if I'm not mistaken, Cashman did not play the last time. There's an argument that he's been their best defensive player all year, and he wasn't in that game. I think that stopping that Jahmyr Gibbs big plays, last time he broke out, he juked, was it Cam Bynum, went for a long touchdown that got them kind of rolling on offense. I think they need to avoid that. And if you look at what they did against Green Bay, they stopped the run extremely, extremely well. And even though I have as much belief in Jared Goff to be a great quarterback and carry the load, a lot of it does start with Jahmyr Gibbs and their ability to play fake off of what he's doing and so forth. So I think that they have to start there. And then I'll be very curious, do you blitz Goff? Because they pressured Goff a lot last time, and he came through with big throws. You might say, if you're Brian Flores, if we pressure him again, is he going to hit every throw that he hit last time? The answer might be yes. Or you might think, well, that's going to be hard to do because he played amazing in the game against the Vikings, against some of those blitzes. So are they going to be aggressive? I think the Vikings will be who they are, which is they're going to go after him.
Sam Darnold last time, he had a career high in passing yards. Brock Purdy just did that. How many do you think Darnold goes for in this game? And is this going to be one of those shootout type games? Do you have that sense going into it?
It feels ridiculous to say 340 because that's such a high number. He just threw for 377. It just feels like it's going to go back and forth and back and forth. The Lions have never been able to cover Justin Jefferson. They have done so poorly against Jefferson that there's one game where it worked out and we still talk about it. Hey, remember that one time you guys slowed him down? All the rest of the times he averages like 120 yards per game. I don't see anybody who's slowing him down and these weapons. And ultimately, Kevin O'Connell is going to push the gas pedal down and believe in his quarterback, and they're going to throw the heck out of the ball. I mean, 320, something like that. I think it's going over 3.
Going over 3. All right. Last time you asked me for my score prediction. So I want yours. This was such a tight game last time. What we got this time around?
I'm going to go 38-34 Vikings.
38-34 Vikings.
I think they make one more stop. One more stop because they have better defensive players.
Okay. I see that. I think the Lions defense makes the stops in the second half when they need to. I think they get a big one before halftime. And the offense turns out a last-second field goal, not final possession. I think the Vikings will have the final possession, but I think that the Lions win 30-27.
I mean, one way or
That's
the other.
That's where I'm at.
It's going to be great. Where does this sit for you since you moved to Detroit for sporting events you've covered?
For a game? Oh, for sporting events I've covered? Number one all time for me, I don't know if anything's going to top it, is the Rose Bowl. Last year with Michigan, Alabama. That was just so incredible because you're going for what is just an iconic college football game, and you pair that with the college football playoff too. This is number 2. This is number 2. Ask me after the fact. How about that? Ask me after the fact. Because also that game, I mean, location-wise, implications, it went to overtime. It came down to a goal line stop again on Jalen Milroe for that Michigan defense. That's a lot of hype to live up to. So I'm going to go with a solid number 2. Like pregame hype going into it, I would say it's still number 2. But hopefully they can pull off the upset. We shall see. And move it to number 1 in the power rankings.
It's up there for me too. Minneapolis Miracle game, even leading into that with Drew Brees coming into town, the number 1 defense, all that stuff is probably at the top because this isn't a playoff game, but it does have massive implications.
It has the feel. I mean, does it have the feel there too?
Oh, I mean, 100%. Because, big time.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, the Lions have never had the number 1 seed. So I think that's the thing that everybody, but also like environment wise, it's hard to beat that home playoff game that they had last year for the first time in 3 decades with Matthew Stafford coming back. Like whenever you like, I don't know if this game has that feel. It has that feel in a different way because that one was just almost pure emotion. And this one is just more like not expectation, but just all football, all we expect to win this game type of mentality. At least the feeling here in the city. I mean, it's 2 different levels, but on the same wavelength.
No, I think you're exactly right about that when it comes to just Detroit, where there's 2 different feelings here. The Vikings are kind of like Detroit was last year, where, okay, you expected them to be, at least you expected Detroit to be good last year, but not as good as they were. And then with the Vikings, they're exceeding expectations and sort of doing the no one believed in us thing where everyone actually did believe in the Lions. So now it's very much in prove it mode. So there's 2 different things conflicting and running into each other at Ford Field where I will be and you will be on Sunday Night Football. I can't wait, Hobie.
Can't wait, man.
Great to get together with you. I'm excited.
I feel like my 2 worlds are colliding right now, and it's kind
of
weird.
I know. You got to do the same thing with anybody who's been in a different market. Then you come back, you got to talk to everybody. It's like going to the holiday party.
Wait, though. I can't wait.
Show up early. Exactly.
Can't wait. So many familiar faces. Minnesota was good to me. Had some great years there. Can't wait to see you, some of the other faces, my former Fox 9 counterparts over in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Looking forward to it.
Well, thank you so much, Hobie, and I will see you Sunday, buddy. Appreciate your time.
Sounds great, man. See you in that press box.